Thanks for joining us for the executive series. I'm talking to Mark Thompson, who is the Managing Director and founder of Talga Resources. Mark, it's good to talk to you.
Morning, cheers.
Now, for people who aren't familiar with Talga, tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at the moment.
Yep, so Talga owns the world's highest grade graphite deposit in Sweden, and we've actually been working on developing that into graphene products, so becoming a vertically integrated, highly conductive material supplier, so almost more like a specialty chemicals company that goes all the way from the ground all the way through to products like paints, concrete and things like that.
Indeed. So this is really an important trend that we're seeing at the moment that in large part is being underpinned by the improvements in battery technology. Tell us a little more about that.
We moved in a graphite back in 2011 to hook up into the megatrend of batteries. So since then we've seen things rise and fall. Lithium's gone up and down. Cobalt is now the hottest thing in the world. Graphite also has been. Batteries are part of an ongoing, they're not going to be going down. They've become vital and they're increasing in scale rapidly. So most major manufacturers of not just automotive but microgrids and many other devices are using more and more batteries. So it's not something that's short term, it's something that's very serious. Obviously it's been backed by major companies, it's been backed by governments, so there's actually legislative drives behind that increase in battery demand as well. So it's really unhooked itself from I would say, the vagaries of the normal capital market. Yep. And it's headed into material reality.
That's a good point that you make about government support, because that can often make the difference between a tipping point and not. So what are you seeing along those lines in Australia in particular?
Look, in the early days, people think about subsidies as being vital to that, but it's more around legislation on output, on CO2 emissions being carved up. So when you drop that and push those boundaries, manufacturers have to respond in various ways. So it essentially drives a whole range of things that are outside the normal investment sphere. And so therefore, it sort of jumps the economics gap on the uptake of new technologies. Normally have quite a bit of a gap to get over, and then it happens all in a rush. I think what you're seeing now is the rush, but it's actually based on the fundamentals of the demand drivers and the government are just helping that gap. But behind that is actually things like performance. Higher performance batteries, like cars that actually go faster, cars that make you move around the city actually better than your current car. So it's not just a CO2, it's not just a green story or a clean tech story. It's a bit more fundamental than that. And I would say we're still in the early stages of it. And what look like booms are actually just people repositioning themselves and rebalancing what is actually a sort of growth in material technologies that the world is doing regardless of what people's opinions are.
Indeed. So let's talk a little bit about the resource profile.
Yeah, we have the world's highest grade, which we just published this morning an update to. So now it's 12.3 million tonnes at 25.5%. So that means that it's really conductive straight out of the ground. So our ore is a semiconductor. So not only is it really high grade, it also conducts electricity straight from the ground. So we can literally carve it into electrodes directly from the ground and use them in various chemical processes to make products in less steps, using less energy and less toxic sort of backgrounds, I guess, than what most other companies do to make things like batteries, for example.
And that makes obviously a massive difference where costs are concerned.
It does. It's a cost argument, but also getting back to your point about governments and legislation and those sorts of things, is the major manufacturers want clean supply chains. So we're in a first world jurisdiction, being Sweden. Our power supplies are hydroelectricity. So when you look at what has to happen now is you have a carbon budget that runs through the life of a product, all the way from its birth to its death, and sometimes it's recycling. So when you start your product base using our graphite, for example, or graphene products, and they come from an eco source in a first world country, the major manufacturers like that. It's stable, it's long-term, and it lowers your CO2 impact of your product through its lifetime. And it carries on all the way through that product. And so there are some advantages in our assets being in Sweden compared to most other jurisdictions.
Let's talk a little bit about your customer base.
Yeah, we've just recently announced a deal with Chemetall, which is a subsidiary of BASF, which is one of the world's largest chemical conglomerates. They've got a coatings division, so they make lots of things. But our deal is substantial. It includes exclusive supply during development of product phases. And that's in the paints and coatings sphere. But we're also looking at concrete products and several other sectors that are all quite large to do with aerospace. So right now our customers are major companies that make the things behind what you see. So it's the chemical conglomerates that actually make the products that go into all the products that you know. But this is This is a substantial deal for us. It means we're in revenue essentially during the development phase as well. So they're actually paying for our material during the sampling and development phases. So that provides a revenue stream. And this is based on a strategy of development that has worked in coatings, and we'll roll that out into other things as well, like concrete, carbon fibres and other things that our graphene suits.
Okay, so let's look at the 5-year strategy for the organisation. What's going to define that?
It's really moving on to large-scale, full-scale development in Sweden, where we have essentially full vertical integration of a large plant in Sweden producing graphene and graphite products to use all of that material for making enhanced products, or additives. So graphene, a lot of people misunderstand. They think it's like a sheet or it's an object by itself. It's actually an additive. So it's like a little black fairy dust that you mix into something and it makes something more conductive or stronger or lighter. So what we'll be doing is becoming the world's largest and best margin producer of that material, which can improve almost every material on Earth if you want to make it stronger or lighter or more functional, where you make something that's currently an insulator but you want it to conduct temperature or electricity. That's what those materials can do. So our aim is to be essentially not only globally significant but potentially a market maker for graphene products.
Mark, it's an exciting time for that sort of technology. We look forward to following the story with you.
Cheers, thank you.
And thanks for joining us for the Executive Series.